Welcome back to NBA Cinema, man. So we saw recently Rich Paul had come out and said that Miami had a big two. Say he doesn't love a big three and talked about why big threes doesn't work to fit his narrative. I know LeBron has tried to go back and clean up that Maverick series as if it didn't happen in the fashion that it happened. Now the latest thing is Bosh wasn't even a big three caliber player, despite averaging, 24 points, 11 rebounds that last year in Toronto before he moved on over, to the Miami Heat. And it's been a lot of narrative changing, a lot of narrative bending around who Chris Bosh was as a power forward. He was one of the very best in the game. By that time, Tim Duncan had began to age a little bit, even though he was still very formidable. By that time he had been low managing a little bit and starting to he was starting to decline, but obviously he was still good enough for them to beat Miami. And Tony Parker was phenomenal when they did beat Miami in that series, in the NBA Finals. But, I wanted to come back and revisit this because we got to go back to something Udonis Haslem said about the importance of Chris Bosh. Let's check it out.
That's not the end all be all. I always love a big two. I don't really love a big three. I don't really. People talk big three, but the big three thing has never really worked. And you say, well, what happened in Miami? That wasn't really a big three. There was three guys that went in the lottery and they did really well individually on their team, so they put up big numbers and had big accomplishments. But when you think about it, Bosh was the ultimate professional. He took a back seat and he played a role in which, because he had such a high IQ and he was such a professional as an individual, his approach to everything is what made that work. When you look in Boston, okay, you can say Ray Allen and Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce was a big three. Again,
Rondo.
thinking about names, but the way that offense was ran, Rondo's capability during that time, it was a lot different. When you seen people go for that, it never really worked. And
So Rich Paul's argument now is that this team organically came about. It wasn't deliberate. They didn't try to go out and get a big three. Dwayne Wade and LeBron James, they joined forces, but they got role players. They got the Joel Anthony's, the Chris Bosches. They just lumping them all in together like that. Like Chris Bosh wasn't the other uh, guy that was making all-star teams over and over again on that roster. But let's see what UD had to say about all this.
I'm telling you, CB, if he stayed healthy, would have been still be playing.
Everybody think that our most important player was Bron. Our most important player, not our best player, but our most important player was CB.
Yeah, damn.
He was our most important player. Because if Bron went down, you could bring in D Wade, and it's not the same player, but you're gonna get similar results of what you're gonna get out of the player. Making plays, he can go for 30. We couldn't simulate it. We didn't have another CB. If that went down and he got hurt, we didn't have another one of those.
And the way Spo started using him too was impossible to guard. Like he was shooting threes. Like he was.
That's why
that man was cold, brother.
Nah, he closed it out on threes as a big.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And that was back when no
pop
one
threes
no one
too.
did that.
Nah,
Pick a pop three.
I remember people who were fans of LeBron were very upset, irate even, with Udonis Haslem for this take when he said that was the most important player on the team. Um, Udonis is pretty much saying he kept the floor space because at times we saw early on D Wade and LeBron, they were trying to do cuts, in tight quarters, started out with 11 and 10, really struggled for floor spacing, right? They were great defensively, top notch athletes, but spacing is what made those guys go. LeBron wasn't quite the shooter he is today. And Wade, he was a reluctant 3-point shooter. Not that he couldn't make them, but he was reluctant. Did a lot of stuff in the mid range, slasher, attacking the rack, float game, stuff like that. He would turn down threes often. And so a lot of times they would shrink the court on those guys and they would have some issues, against some of the better teams in the league. But Chris Bosh standing over there in that corner, knocking down threes. Not that Bosh wasn't still a post player, but for all intents and purposes, he was the best shooter from distance, at that point, especially off the catch. LeBron needed that. uh, for floor spacing, for him to be able to do his thing, because him and Wade, although they were terrific players, they got in each other's way a lot. And what I will say is they were good enough athletically and defensively to kind of hide some of that because they never really fit as players if you think about it, right? They're not a natural fit. They were just more gifted than most people at their positions. I mean, Wade, some people have him as the best, third best shooting guard of all time right after Kobe. So you got the shooting guard right behind Kobe all time, and LeBron, many got, best small forward ever, and some, even the best player ever on the same team. And so you look at that, and then you look at Chris Bosh, man. Chris Bosh, he would have been, I can't remember, he wasn't on the top 75, I don't believe, but he would have been, had he not gotten injured, he would have been one of those top 75 players because he would have stayed in Miami. And, when you really think about it, uh, when Jimmy had come to Miami, if Bosh was still there and Bosh was still playing at a high level when they first got Jimmy, especially back around like the bubble time and all that, then they would have probably really competed, in one of those finals. That Jimmy Butler was leading them to because of Bosh's skill set. Bosh would even be stronger in the paint at this age. I think they would have done great things. I think they would have done great things together, but Bosh had that blood clot and, it ended up ultimately ending his career. But there's no need to try to spin the narrative and make Bosh less than what he was to lift LeBron James up, man. I always say this, LeBron's career is great enough where you ain't got to do nothing else to it. Now, we're not all going to believe he's number one of all time, but that's not going to stop the people that believe he's number one of all time. Like he's done enough for them in their lifetime. He's got enough moments for them to feel like he's number one of all time. And I always look at it as era. Now, I can say LeBron is number one of this era, and he's got substantial claims to back that up. But this is what I don't like. I don't like when they try to go on shows and make you say, you didn't see what you thought you saw in these series. This is what you actually saw. That's what I have the biggest problem with LeBron James and his camp. And that's what he's mad at Stephen A. Smith about. I'm tired of beating around the bush about it and, you know, basically saying that it was about Bronny. It wasn't about Bronny. It's about this narrative that, Stephen A. Smith keeps pushing Jordan as number one on TV. I mean, God, we got to call something what it is. Sometimes, man, that's what it is. And I know people say, yeah, you going to say what a man's thinking in his head. And we know what this is, man. We can't be, we got to call out stuff that we see, in real time. We can't just act like we didn't see it and say the popular thing that everybody's going to want you to say. No, he is upset about the Jordan thing. The Jordan is the GOAT. And Stephen A. Smith, how loud his voice is and his influence. And that's why he confronted him, man. So, yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Till next time. Peace.